Werewolf Shifter Romance, Prologue. The night had always whispered to Lyra Callan. But tonight, it screamed. The city's neon haze burned behind her like a false sun, all shallow gleam and deeper lies. Skyscrapers stood like silent judges as she fled, their windows catching the last of the evening light, reflecting back at her like shattered glass. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. Couldn't. Behind her lay the life she had stitched together with trembling hands and fragile hope. And in one brutal heartbeat, it had unraveled, ripped open like a wound that would never stop bleeding. She had seen them. His hands on her sister's hips. His mouth claiming what he had vowed only to her. Their moans echoing down the hallway like a cruel, erotic lullaby meant to shatter bones. Lyra had not screamed. She had not cried. She had simply stood there, numb as the world tilted sideways and something inside her, something tender and trusting, curled up and died. Now, the city fell away in her rearview, swallowed by mist and distance. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel of her old Jeep Wrangler as she climbed deeper into the mountains, the road narrowing with each bend. The trees rose around her like dark cathedral pillars, their branches heavy with secrets. Mist coiled around the tires, curling like ghost fingers, clinging to her escape. Wind moaned through the forest like a warning. Still, she drove. The map she'd folded in the glove compartment was barely necessary. Her mother's cabin, no, hers now, was hidden deep in the Blue Vein Mountains, far beyond the range of cell service, further still from betrayal. It was the one place no one could follow. The one place untouched by lies. And maybe, just maybe, it was the place where she could finally remember who she was, without him. Without them. A single tear tracked down her cheek. She brushed it away, jaw tight. Never again, she whispered into the dark, her voice a raw rasp in her throat. Never again will I be made a fool. The forest didn't answer. But something else did. A flicker of motion in the treeline. A glint of amber eyes in her peripheral vision. Gone before she could turn her head. Her breath caught. Her fingers clenched the wheel tighter. It's just a deer, she murmured, convincing herself. A fox. A trick of the light. But the air had changed. Thickened. Turned electric, like the moment before a storm or the split second before lightning strikes the ground. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. The trees pressed closer. The mist deepened. She pressed the gas a little harder. Somewhere behind her, something moved. Silently. Swiftly. Her eyes flicked to the rearview. Nothing but fog. She shouldn't have left so late. Should have waited until morning. But the thought of sleeping under the same roof as them, her sister's laughter still echoing in her ears, had been unbearable. Branches scraped across the side of the car like claws. Then she saw it. Just ahead, in the curve of the road, a figure, tall, still, vaguely human, standing in the middle of the lane. Not moving. Not flinching. Lyra slammed the brakes. Tires screamed. The steering wheel jerked beneath her hands. The world tilted violently as the Jeep spun, gravel and pine needles kicking up in a spray. Her scream never made it past her lips as the car lurched off the road and down a shallow embankment. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. The world went white. And then... stillness. The only sound was the soft hiss of steam rising from the engine. Somewhere nearby, an owl called, a long, low note like a funeral bell. Lyra blinked through the haze, her forehead stinging, warm blood trickling down to her temple. Her hands trembled as she unbuckled herself. Pain screamed through her shoulder as she forced the door open and staggered out into the cold night air. Pine needles crunched beneath her boots. The scent of moss and old rain clung to the earth. Her breath ghosted in front of her. The forest was silent. Watching. Waiting. She looked back to the road. The figure was gone. Her pulse thundered. "Hello?" she called, voice hoarse. No answer. But something was there. She felt it in the way her skin prickled. In the way her instinct screamed to run. Something primal. Predatory. She turned in a slow circle, her breath catching in her throat. That's when she saw it, just at the edge of the trees. Eyes. Not human. Not animal. Golden and glowing like twin moons in the dark. Not one pair. 3. She stumbled back, heart lurching. Then, one set of eyes blinked. A figure emerged from the mist, broad-shouldered, shirtless despite the cold, skin dappled in silver scars and tribal ink that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. His voice was low. A growl layered beneath words. "She's crossed into the boundary." Another figure stepped beside him. Female. Feral. Her hair a tangled crown of black curls, her teeth gleaming as she smiled like a wolf preparing to feast. "She smells like blood and betrayal." The third stepped forward, taller than the rest. His presence made the forest bow. Even the mist seemed to retreat from him. He said nothing. He only looked at her, through her, like he could see every lie, every wound, every hidden piece she'd buried beneath the weight of heartbreak. And then he spoke. Just one word. "Mine." The forest howled. Chapter 1. The cold came in waves. It wasn't just the frost clinging to Lyra's coat or the sharp sting of snow melting against her skin. It was inside her now, a slow, creeping chill that dulled thought and blurred time. The forest pressed in around her, dark, towering sentinels swaying under the weight of snow. She had no idea how long she'd wandered since the crash. Minutes. Hours. Branches snagged at her sleeves as she stumbled blindly through the trees, blood mixing with the snow at her temple. Every breath she took cut into her lungs like glass. Somewhere beneath the ringing in her ears, she could still hear the echo of that word. Mine. Had it been real? A hallucination brought on by shock and blood loss? She hadn't imagined those eyes. The way the air had turned sharp, as though the very woods were alive, listening. A branch snapped behind her. Lyra froze. Another crunch, heavy footfalls through the snow. She turned, slowly, heart a trapped bird fluttering in her chest. Nothing. Just the shadows, shifting. She stumbled backward, breath coming fast, vision blurring. Then a growl split the silence. Low. Deep. Not human. She turned to run. But pain lanced up her leg, her ankle gave out beneath her. She hit the snow hard, gasping, the cold stealing her breath. And from the trees, he emerged. Towering. Broad-shouldered. Clad in black like the night itself. His coat hung open, revealing a bare chest etched with hard muscle and old scars. Snowflakes clung to the strands of his dark hair, and his eyes, ice-gray and glowing faintly under the moonlight, locked onto hers. He didn't speak. Not at first. Lyra blinked up at him, heart hammering so hard she thought it might break free. Every instinct screamed danger. But not the kind she should run from. The kind that called to something buried inside her. She tried to sit up. I crashed. I didn't mean to. He was at her side before she could finish. Moving fast. Too fast. She flinched, but he didn't touch her. Just knelt beside her, his gaze scanning her with brutal efficiency. You're bleeding. His voice was deep gravel, threaded with something ancient. She swallowed. I'm fine. I just need to get to my cabin, my grandmother's cabin. It's nearby, I think. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned closer, nostrils flaring subtly. As though he were scenting her. His jaw flexed. His eyes darkened. Where exactly is this cabin? I don't know the coordinates, she managed. Just somewhere off an old forestry road. I inherited it after she died. It's the only place You crossed a border, he said quietly, like it meant something sacred. You shouldn't be here. Not during the waxing moon. She stared. What are you talking about? Who are you? The man's expression shuddered, hardening like winter ice. Ronan. Ronan Vane. He stood, towering over her like a shadow given flesh. For a moment, he seemed to war with himself, then without warning, he bent and scooped her into his arms. She gasped, struggling. Wait, what are you? Put me down. His grip tightened. You'll freeze before you make it another mile. Or worse, something else finds you. His chest radiated heat, his heartbeat thudding steady beneath her cheek. She felt it, an odd pull in her bones, her blood. Something in her recognized him. She couldn't explain it, didn't want to. But her body responded. Still, she whispered, this is crazy. You have no idea. The cabin appeared like a ghost through the trees, ancient, two-story, its slanted roof heavy with snow. Smoke curled from the chimney. Yellow light flickered behind fogged windows. Lyra blinked. That's not my cabin. It's mine, Ronan muttered. Yours isn't safe right now. Before she could argue, the door swung open and a gust of warm air rushed out. Inside, a fire roared in a massive stone hearth, and furs covered the worn floorboards. The space smelled of pine, wood smoke, and something wild. Something masculine. He set her down carefully on a long, low couch near the fire. As soon as his hands left her, a chill replaced the warmth they'd left behind. You need rest, he said gruffly. She eyed him warily. You didn't answer my question. He didn't look at her. He was already at the hearth, stoking the flames with practiced ease. His silhouette cut a sharp figure in the firelight, broad, powerful, and unmistakably dangerous. I'm not from around here, she tried again. I don't know what you meant about borders, or moons, or... I know, he said, cutting her off. Something in his tone silenced her. Not cruel. Just tired. Guarded. There are things in these woods you don't understand, he went on, softer now. Things that don't care if you're lost. That smell your blood and don't ask questions. Lyra's stomach twisted. And you're one of them. He turned, finally meeting her gaze. I'm not like them. But he didn't say he wasn't dangerous. The fire snapped. Outside, the wind howled against the eaves like a beast trying to claw its way in. How did you find me? She whispered. He was quiet for a long time. I smelled you. Lyra blinked. Excuse me. His jaw ticked. He turned away again. It doesn't matter. You'll be gone before the full moon. Her heart skipped. What? You'll rest. Heal. Then you'll go. There's no place for you here. His words were clipped. But the way he said you'll go, like it hurt him to say it, sent a strange ache blooming in her chest. I don't understand. You're human, he said simply. This territory isn't. A dozen questions burned on her tongue, but he left before she could ask them, disappearing down a hallway and closing the door behind him. The hours passed in silence, broken only by the crackle of fire and the storm outside. Lyra lay wrapped in a thick wool blanket, her ankle wrapped, her head aching. But more than the pain, it was him she couldn't stop thinking about. Ronan Vane. A name that felt carved into her bones. She had never met anyone like him. He radiated power and solitude, like a wolf exiled from its pack, but there was something else too. The way he'd looked at her. Not with pity. Not even desire. Possession. And something darker. She rose slowly, curiosity gnawing at her as she limped toward the far wall, where an ornate shelf lined with old objects caught her eye. Dusty tomes, jars of herbs, a bundle of dried lavender. And in the center of the shelf, an old relic. A carved stone amulet, smooth and round, etched with a strange sigil. It pulsed faintly in the firelight. She didn't know why she reached for it. Only that she had to. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the world split open. She gasped as fire tore through her limbs. Not pain. Power. It rushed through her veins, igniting something ancient in her blood. The room disappeared. She stood in a field of crimson snow beneath a sky bruised with storm. The moon above her bled red, full and hungry. And she was shifting. Bones cracking, muscles stretching, fur bursting from her skin. A wolf, she was a wolf, howling under the blood-moon sky. A voice echoed in her skull, ancient and female. Marked. Chosen. Betrayed. The blood moon calls its lost daughter home. She screamed. Chapter 2. The wind keened like a woman mourning across the snow-veiled forest, curling around the cabin nestled deep in the Winterfong territory. Morning light filtered through the frost-glazed panes, fractured into shards of gold and silver. Inside, Lyra stirred from a restless sleep, her breath catching in her throat before memory flooded her. Snow, pain, the stranger with eyes like glaciers cracking under pressure. Ronan. His name pulsed in her like a second heartbeat. She rose slowly, muscles tight, the vision from last night still burning behind her eyelids. Blood-red skies. Her own scream tearing from a throat that wasn't fully human. The echo of a wolf's howl that had come from within her. She touched the scar beneath her collarbone. Still warm. Still real. Downstairs, the scent of wood smoke and roasted meat tugged at her. But so did something else. A pull. A low hum beneath her skin. The moment her bare feet hit the timbered floor, the hum intensified. She followed it, drawn, instinctual. As if the house itself had a pulse, and it was speaking to her in forgotten tongues. At the foot of the stairs, she paused. The living room was empty, the fire banked low. Ronan was gone. She exhaled and moved to the hearth. On the mantel, nestled between old leather-bound books and a hand-carved wolf totem, lay a silver pendant. Simple, unadorned, but thrumming with a strange energy. When her fingers brushed it, a rush of warmth surged through her palm. She jerked back, heart racing. "You should be careful what you touch in this house," came a voice behind her, low and rough-edged. She turned fast. Ronan stood in the threshold, snow still clinging to the fur-lined coat slung over one shoulder. His eyes, frost-pale and too knowing, raked her like a cold current. "You left early," Lyra said, trying to cover her embarrassment with a facade of calm. Ronan's gaze flicked to the pendant. "That belonged to my mother. It's not just jewelry. It's a binding charm." Her brows pulled together. Binding to what? His jaw clenched. He said nothing. Of course. Secrets again. "I need answers," she said, her voice firmer now. "I had a vision last night. Not a dream. It felt real. My body, my skin, was changing." Ronan turned away, stripping off his coat and tossing it over the back of the chair. "You want answers? Fine. Then you need to meet someone. The path to the seer's cottage wound through the dense pine wood like a vein of secrets, the snow tamped flat by Ronan's heavy strides. Lyra followed, each step deepening her unease. The village of Elderglen emerged like a ghost, quiet, ancient. Smoke curled from stone chimneys, and old-world homes huddled close, their eaves sagging with time and weight. The townspeople watched from behind windows, some pressing palms to the glass as she passed. She was the stranger. The outsider. But more than that, she was marked. Somehow, they knew. They reached the seer's dwelling, a crooked house built around the trunk of a massive ash tree. Vines wound through the walls like veins, pulsing faintly as if the house breathed. Ronan knocked once. The door creaked open without touch. A voice, brittle as dead leaves, called from within. "Enter, Lyra of both worlds." The moment she stepped over the threshold, warmth engulfed her, not of fire, but of memory. Of bloodlines singing through marrow and bone. The seer stood at the heart of the room, draped in violet and silver, her milky eyes seeing too much. "You've come late," she said. "The moon has been calling you since your first cry." Lyra swallowed. "You know who I am." The seer approached, her gnarled fingers brushing Lyra's hair. "I know what you carry. Wolf blood. Dormant, buried deep. And something older still. The child of a forbidden bond, human and beast. You are prophecy-born, girl." Ronan stiffened near the door. "Tell her what she needs to know, Rhea. Not your riddles." The seer chuckled. "Impatient alpha blood. Always snarling at time." She turned back to Lyra, expression softening. "1,000 winters ago, a wolf of two bloods was prophesied. One who would walk between worlds, break the curse of the fated moon, and either unite the scattered packs, or destroy them." Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. "That's insane." "I'm no chosen one." "You will be," the seer murmured. "Your blood has begun to stir." The relic awakened it. Ronan stepped closer. "And what of the curse?" he demanded. The seer's smile faded. "If she binds with the wrong alpha, it will unravel everything. Love may become ruin. That is the burden she must carry." Later, as they walked back through the snowbound woods, silence stretched taut between them. "What did she mean?" Lyra asked quietly. "About me binding with an alpha." Ronan exhaled slowly. "There's an ancient curse tied to the Winterfang line. A punishment for a betrayal centuries old. If I take a fated mate, she dies before the next blood moon. It's happened 3 times in our history." She stopped walking. "So you think I'm your fated mate?" His eyes met hers, raw, unreadable. "I know you are." Her heart stuttered. "But it doesn't matter," he added, stepping back, the wall between them slamming down again. "I won't doom you. No matter what my wolf wants." She wanted to scream. To shake him. But beneath the fury was something else, terror. Of what this meant. Of what she might become. That night, Lyra lay awake on the thick furs Ronan had spread near the hearth. The pendant she'd touched earlier now rested beside her like a question unanswered. Outside, the wind picked up, howling like it carried 1,000 broken promises. She dreamt of fire. Of a forest bleeding shadows. And of 2 wolves, one white as snow, one black as void, circling each other in an endless dance of hunger and hate. Far away, beneath a hunter's moon, another figure watched the woods. Damon Kale leaned against a tree, arms folded, dark cloak fluttering behind him like wings. His smile was sharp. Predatory. "She's here," he murmured to the shadow beside him. A pair of yellow eyes gleamed from the darkness. "The half-blood." Damon's grin widened. The prophecy's prize. And she's bonded already, how tragic. The shadow shifted. Shall we take her now? No, Damon said, voice curling like smoke. Let her settle. Let her hope. Then we take everything. The wind slammed against the cabin windows, rattling the panes like bony fingers. Lyra startled awake, heart pounding. A sound. Scraping. She rose, barefoot again, and crossed the floor. Outside, snowflakes danced in the moonlight. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Until she saw them, 3 long claw marks carved into the wood just beneath her window. Fresh. Still bleeding sap. And scrawled in red across the glass, in a language she shouldn't understand but somehow did. You belong to me. Her breath caught. Then the pendant on her nightstand hummed. Once. And went still. Chapter 3. The night was wind-lashed and tense with storm-born energy, the kind that hummed through the bones and set instincts on edge. Rain hadn't yet fallen, but the clouds overhead were swollen and dark, pressing down on the dense woods that wrapped around the town like an ancient sentinel. Lyra should have gone back to the inn hours ago. But something had pulled at her chest, a whisper, a tug beneath her ribs, guiding her deeper into the heart of Hollowshade Forest. Maybe it was the lingering shock of what the seer had told her, the fire in Ronan's eyes when he'd uttered the word, mate, or the way her blood had danced in her veins like it knew something she didn't. She walked a path half swallowed by moss and shadow, her boots muffled against the loamy earth. Her breath formed delicate ghosts in the cool air, and the quiet was too still, unnaturally so, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Then the silence broke. A presence surged from the trees like a dark wave, crashing into her senses. Lyra froze. Her breath hitched. He emerged without a sound. Not from the shadows, but part of them, tall, powerfully built, and beautiful in a way that was both wild and dangerous. Damon Kale. His hair was dark as obsidian, tousled and wet with mist, and his eyes, those eyes were a fierce gold, glowing faintly like twin moons caught in shadow. Power clung to him, animalistic and ancient, as if the forest parted for him, bent to him. Lyra's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice trembling despite the steel she tried to inject into it. He stepped closer, slow and unhurried, like a predator savoring the hunt. I could say the same of you, little flame, Damon said, voice deep, velvet-wrapped and rough at the edges. She flinched. The nickname was foreign and familiar all at once, as if her soul recognized something her mind couldn't name. I know who you are now, he murmured, gaze locked on her mouth. I felt it the second your feet touched this soil. The bond. Ronan said, she started, but Damon growled low in his throat, the sound primal. Ronan doesn't know what he's dealing with. He thinks he's your fated mate. He stepped into her space, the warmth of him unbearable. But it's not him. It was never him. It's me. No, she whispered, but her body betrayed her, her skin flushed, her breath caught. Something inside her reached, ached at his nearness. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, rough and reverent all at once. I've waited too long, Lyra. I won't let him have you. Before she could respond, before she could retreat, he bent and kissed her. It was a claiming. His mouth crushed hers, fierce and demanding, tasting like storm winds in danger. A sound escaped her throat, half protest, half surrender, and the moment their lips met, everything changed. A flare of white-hot power burst from her chest. Damon reeled back with a snarl, thrown off his feet by a blast of unseen energy. He hit the forest floor hard, his breath driven from his lungs, eyes wide in shock. Lyra stumbled, clutching her chest as heat surged through her, not pain, but raw power, wild and ancient, as if her blood had just remembered what it was made of. Her fingers glowed faintly, pulsing with silver veins of light beneath the skin. Damon groaned, rising slowly. Your power, he rasped, eyes narrowing in disbelief. It's waking. I didn't mean to. But he wasn't listening anymore. His gaze wasn't on her face, it was on the mark that had bloomed on her collarbone, a crescent moon surrounded by thorny vines. You are the one, he said hoarsely. The prophecy. It's you. Panic seized her. She didn't know what was happening, what she'd unleashed, but the air around her was crackling with energy she didn't understand. She turned and ran, branches whipped her face, roots clawed at her ankles, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. She didn't look back. The woods grew stranger as she fled. Thicker, older, and drenched in a kind of magic that hummed in the soil. She wasn't even sure where she was going, only that her legs moved of their own accord, driven by fear, confusion, and something hotter, fury. They're all the same, she thought bitterly. Ronan with his restraint, Damon with his demands. Fated. Claimed. What about her choice? She burst through a break in the trees and fell to her knees, gasping, on a patch of moonlit clearing. She gripped the earth like it might hold her steady. And then she heard the chuckle. Low. Warm. Amused. She whirled around. He was lounging against a fallen tree, one leg bent, arms crossed over his broad chest like he had all the time in the world. Well, you sure know how to make an entrance, he said. Lyra blinked. He was handsome, of course he was, only this one was different. Not like Ronan's tortured nobility or Damon's dark intensity. This man radiated charm like the sun. Tousled honey-brown hair, teasing gray eyes, a crooked grin that was equal parts mischief and dare. Who the hell are you? She demanded. He pushed off the log and walked toward her, a swagger in his step. Name's Corin Drace. But you can just call me Trouble. She stared. You're another alpha. He gave a mock bow. Third son of the Eastern Crescent Pack. At your service, my lady. She opened her mouth, no doubt to yell, scream, question, but he held up a hand. Let me guess. You're running from Alpha number 1 or number 2? She blinked. Thought so. He laughed softly, eyes twinkling. Let me guess. Damon kissed you. Something exploded. And now you're wondering what fresh hell this is. Exactly, she breathed. Corin moved closer, but unlike the others, he didn't impose. He circled her, like he was studying a puzzle. You smell like fate. But not just one thread. You smell like all of us. She stiffened. What does that mean? He stopped in front of her, eyes suddenly serious. It means you're not just a mate. You're the key. To all of us. To the war. To the balance. Or the ruin. Lightning forked through the sky, illuminating the clearing in a sudden burst of silver light. Before Lyra could ask anything more, a sound split the night, growling. From the trees. Damon. Ronan. Both stepped into the clearing from opposite sides, eyes locked not on her, but on each other. Tension rippled through the air like a drawn bowstring. She's mine, Damon snarled, body half-shifting, claws glinting at his sides. You kissed her, Ronan growled. You forced it. She's not yours. Corin stepped between them, arms spread like he was trying to mediate two wild animals. Let's all take a deep breath. Neither listened. Damon lunged first, a blur of black rage. Ronan met him head-on, their bodies colliding with the force of thunder. Fangs flashed. Claws tore into flesh. Corin swore and yanked Lyra back, shielding her with his body. Damn idiots, he muttered, eyes scanning the chaos. Blood hit the ground. Snarls turned savage. The forest lit up with the fury of warring alphas, one fueled by possessive hunger, the other by fated restraint. And Lyra, heart pounding, glowing faintly in the darkness, felt her own power rising again. Then Damon's claws slashed toward Ronan's throat. And a voice echoed through the trees like thunder breaking. Enough. The clearing shook. Every leaf trembled. And from the shadows stepped a fourth figure, tall and hooded, the sigil of the old gods glowing on his chest. Every alpha froze. Lyra's blood turned to ice. Because the newcomer looked right at her and whispered. You were never meant to choose. Chapter 4. The dawn crept softly over Hollowshade, brushing gold across the forest canopy, filtering in through the windows of the small cabin where Ronan and Lyra sat together. The quiet hum of morning was a fragile thing, like the fragile truce between hearts bound by fate and fire. Lyra watched him across the worn wooden table, his profile etched in the pale light, strong jaw clenched, eyes shadowed with the weight of things unsaid. Ronan wasn't the aloof, distant alpha she'd once thought. There was a raw vulnerability beneath the armor, a haunted sadness that seeped through his every gesture. I lost her because of the bond, he said finally, voice low, rough around the edges like a scar still healing. His fingers drummed absently against the table's surface, betraying his struggle. My sister, she was bound to her mate when she was just a girl. Too young, too much power between them, and it shattered. He couldn't control it. She didn't survive the breaking. The words hung heavy in the air. Lyra felt the invisible thread of his pain pull tight in her chest. It was more than loss, it was a cautionary tale, a warning etched into the very core of his being. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Ronan. He shook his head, a bitter smile touching his lips. Don't be. It's why I'm careful with you. With us. The bond isn't just a blessing, it's a weight. A risk. Lyra's breath hitched, heart trembling between hope and fear. She wanted to reach across the table, to close the distance with her hands, to say I'm here. I'm not afraid. But words tangled like thorned vines. Instead, she said, then let's be careful together. The corners of his eyes softened as he nodded, and for a long moment, they just sat, two souls tentative, reaching for something fragile and new. As the morning wore on, Lyra found herself drawn into Ronan's quiet world. They wandered through the forest, the air thick with moss and pine, sunlight dappling their path. He told her stories of his pack, of battles fought and losses endured, the delicate balance of power and protection that kept them alive. And beneath the surface, something else grew, a connection, subtle and electric. Later, as twilight wrapped the world in violet shadows, they stood by the riverbank, the water rushing over smooth stones like a whispered promise. Ronan's gaze was steady, intense, and Lyra's heart thrummed against her ribs. Without a word, he reached for her hand, calloused and warm, and the world narrowed until there was nothing but the two of them, the scent of earth and rain and possibility. Then, their lips met. It was gentle at first, a question asked in silence, a tentative brush of warmth. But soon the kiss deepened, fierce and desperate, as if both were trying to claim something that had been denied for too long. Lyra closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment, to the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. For once, it felt right. Like the universe had paused to let them breathe. Then, a sharp flash of pain seared through her chest. Her eyes snapped open. She pulled back, gasping, heart pounding with alarm. Ronan's brow furrowed. What? It's like someone else felt that, she whispered, voice trembling. Like a shock, far away, but real. His jaw clenched. That means. Yes, Lyra said, voice cracking. I'm linked to more than one of you. The revelation crashed over them like a tidal wave, impossible, dangerous, and yet undeniable. 3 bonds, Ronan breathed, voice raw. You're tri-bound. Lyra shook her head, panic rising like a storm tide. But only one bond can survive. If the others break, what happens to me? To all of us. Ronan reached for her again, fingers brushing her cheek with fierce tenderness. We'll figure it out. Together. But the fear was real, gnawing at her insides like a living thing. Then, as if to underline the truth of it, a sudden glow sparked beneath her skin where their lips had met, a mark blooming in ancient crimson flames across her collarbone. It pulsed like a heartbeat, fierce and undeniable. Lyra's breath caught. The mark was not just a symbol. It was a warning. And a promise. Because as it flared in the fading light, she knew without doubt. Her heart was no longer just hers to give. Chapter 5. The forest felt different now, alive in ways Lyra couldn't yet name. Every rustle of leaf, every snap of twig echoed with a meaning beneath the ordinary. Her senses sharpened, each breath tasted like wildfire on the wind. The mark on her collarbone still glowed faintly beneath her skin, a pulse that mirrored the rhythm of the rising moon. In the heart of Hollow Shade, word spread like wildfire, there would be a trial of the blood moon. It was an ancient rite, older than the mountains that hemmed the pack lands in, a ceremony that would test not just strength, but fate itself. The 3 alpha heirs, their claims intertwined and rivalrous, had summoned their packs. The trial demanded Lyra choose which bond she would claim before the next full moon's rise. Choose wrongly or delay too long, and the curse of the bloodline, dark and deadly, would consume them all. The firelight flickered in Ronan's cabin as he paced, jaw tight, shoulders squared but tense. His gaze caught Lyra's every time she dared to meet it, a turbulent mix of warning and something softer, something almost like hope. You must decide, Ronan said, voice steady but strained. By the full moon. If you refuse, the curse will take us all. Not just you or me. Lyra's chest tightened. The weight of that responsibility was suffocating. She thought of Damon and Corin, their faces etched with unspoken promises and silent threats, and felt the world narrowing like a noose. That night, Damon found her in the forest clearing, shadows draping around him like a cloak. His dark eyes smoldered with something fierce, magnetic, dangerous. Power, he whispered, stepping closer until his breath brushed her ear. The strength to bend fate itself. Join me, Lyra. Be more than a pawn. With me, you'll never be afraid again. The promise tasted like smoke and honey, and for a heartbeat, Lyra felt tempted. But the sharp scent of Ronan's cautious love lingered beneath her skin, tethering her back. Before she could answer, Corin's laughter broke the tension, a bright, reckless sound that rippled through the trees. Freedom, Corin said, his grin wide and wild. No chains, no curses. Just choice. You pick me, and you choose your own path. No one controls your destiny. He reached for her hand, light and teasing, the kind of dangerous freedom that whispered of chaos. Lyra pulled back, the voices swirling in her mind like a storm she couldn't quell. Ronan's warning echoed in her ears, I offer protection. But I can't promise safety from your own heart. Days passed, and with them, the wild stirring of something deep inside her. Powers she barely understood, visions, whispers, senses unbound. She began to hear thoughts not her own, snippets of secrets, half-truths, lies whispered behind closed doors. The world around her was no longer just what she saw and heard. It was tangled in threads of magic and menace. One evening, exhausted and restless, she collapsed by the fire, the crimson mark glowing fiercely beneath her skin. That night, the dream came. She was a wolf, massive, wild, and fierce, running beneath skies soaked in blood-red moonlight. Her fur was a shifting storm of shadows and fire. She felt the world in her bones, the pounding earth, the burn of the wind, the raw hunger of survival. But then, the wolf slowed. It turned, eyes blazing with a terrifying truth. It was her own gaze, wild, untamed, and full of a desperate agony. The wolf tore into her chest, claws sinking deep, rending flesh and soul. Pain exploded through her, raw and jagged. Lyra jolted awake, heart hammering, sweat slick on her skin. The room was dark and silent, but the vision lingered, etched into her mind like a prophecy. She reached to touch the mark on her collarbone. It pulsed beneath her fingers, a living thing, burning with the promise of power and peril. Outside, the full moon began its slow climb, bathing Hollowshade in silver light. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond the trees, eyes watched her, hungry, patient, waiting. Chapter 6. The dawn had barely cracked the sky when the world shifted beneath Lyra's feet. The weight of the night's dream still clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. The glowing mark on her skin pulsed faintly beneath her blouse, a subtle heartbeat that matched the rising tension in her chest. She had felt the eyes on her, hidden, hungry. But now, she sensed something far worse, a betrayal wrapped in cold steel and familiar faces. It started with a whisper. A breath of conversation caught on the wind as she crossed the market square, the scent of fresh bread and pine mingling with something darker. Suspicion curled through her veins, chilling and sharp. She hadn't expected to see Nolan. He stood by the edge of the crowd, a figure carved from her past, a past she had tried so hard to bury beneath layers of new beginnings and secrets. His eyes, dark and calculating, fixed on her with a hunger that made her skin crawl. Nolan, her ex-fiancé, the man who had once promised forever and then shattered her trust with a single lie. But this time, he was not alone. Behind the mask of calm, a truth struck like a blade. One of the alphas was aligned with him. The thought wrenched her breath away, twisted her heart into knots. She had felt their power clashing in the shadows, secrets shared behind closed doors, alliances forged in whispers. And now, the line between friend and enemy was bleeding. Later, she confronted Ronan in the cold gray light of the pack hall, walls heavy with the weight of unspoken fears. "Tell me it's not true," she demanded, voice trembling but fierce. "Is Nolan with one of you? Is he the poison beneath our pack?" Ronan's eyes darkened, a storm breaking behind their steady gaze. He looked away, jaw clenched so tight it might shatter. "Your father," Ronan said finally, voice low and haunted, "he's tied to the curse. Nolan came because of that, because of the power you carry." The words landed like thunder. Lyra's heart cracked wide open. Betrayal wasn't just a stranger's blade, it was the cold hand of her own bloodline reaching out to strangle her. And Ronan, the man who had held her close, now pushed her away like she was a wildfire he couldn't control. The distance between them was a jagged wound, raw and bleeding. In that moment, Lyra fled. The forest was a refuge and a prison. Trees stretched tall and solemn around her, their ancient limbs whispering secrets she barely understood. Her footsteps were frantic, pounding through underbrush slick with morning dew. Somewhere deep inside, the mark burned hotter, a furious pulse that echoed the turmoil inside her. And then she saw him. A figure waiting silently beneath the tangled shadows, motionless as stone. Nolan. His eyes gleamed with cold triumph as he stepped forward, and before she could react, a net, woven with silver threads that shimmered like moonlight, snared her limbs, heavy and unyielding. She struggled, breath ragged, but the binding was merciless. "You were never meant to run," Nolan said, voice low and venomous, like a promise forged in darkness. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs, a desperate drumbeat of fear and fury. As the silver net tightened, the world around her blurred, twisting into a nightmare she couldn't escape. The curse was no longer just a legend, it was hunting her. And this time, it had claws. Chapter 7. The world spun beneath Lyra's closed eyelids, shadows twisting and melting into a blur of pain and cold iron. The silver threads bit into her skin, each strand a cruel reminder of the cage she'd fallen into. The drug coursing through her veins blurred her senses, dulled her will, but beneath the haze, a fire smoldered. Deep inside, something ancient and wild stirred, clawing its way to the surface. She was no longer just the hunted, she was a huntress waiting to break free. Nolan's footsteps echoed on the rough stone path as he dragged her toward the clearing. Moonlight spilled through skeletal branches, bathing the ceremonial site in a pale, eerie glow. Circle of stones cracked with age and power, carved with runes that hummed with latent magic. The air thrummed with dark intent. Nolan's voice was cold and triumphant as he muttered the incantations, words ancient and forbidden, meant to sever bonds that no mortal should touch. But as the ritual began, Lyra's mind sharpened, the fog lifting. She tasted the metallic bitterness of defiance on her tongue and felt the pulse of her blood surge with power, not the powerless pawn he expected, but a force born of the wild moonfire that burned in her veins. Outside the circle, the night was shattered by howls, urgent, desperate. 3 shadows tore through the forest, a trio of alphas united by something stronger than rivalry, a shared purpose, a desperate hope. Damon's eyes blazed with raw hunger, Corin moved with unpredictable grace, and Ronan, steady and fierce, carried the weight of his guilt like armor. They reached the circle just as Nolan's chant reached its crescendo. Lyra's eyes snapped open, blazing with wild light. Chains clattered as they began to melt away, silver threads dissolving like mist under the onslaught of her rising power. A guttural growl tore from her throat, a sound of rage and reclamation. With a roar, she shifted, her form warping, bones reshaping, fur bursting forth like flames. Her lupin shape was magnificent and terrible, a huntress unbound at last. Nolan's smug smile faltered as claws raked through the air, tearing flesh and fabric. The fight was brutal and raw. Lyra's power surged with every strike, her fury a tempest of moonlit fire. When it ended, Nolan lay broken and gasping, the taste of defeat bitter on his lips. But the battle had taken its toll. Lyra's strength ebbed, her wild energy flickering like a dying star. She collapsed into Ronan's arms, breath ragged, skin glowing with lunar fire that illuminated the night. His hands trembled as he held her close, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes breaking through the chaos. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice thick with something unspoken. The pack stood silent around them, the night heavy with promises and dangers yet to come. And in the depths of her soul, Lyra knew, this was only the beginning. Chapter 8. Lyra's breath came in ragged whispers, a fragile thread barely holding her to the world. The wild moonfire still flickered beneath her skin, a soft, luminous pulse that illuminated the shadows of the room Ronan had carried her to. The small cabin, nestled deep within the forest, smelled of pine and earth, the faint scent of herbs burning low on the hearth. She lay cradled against Ronan's chest, his steady heartbeat a rhythmic anchor pulling her from the abyss of pain and confusion. His calloused fingers brushed her hair back, warm and steady, grounding her. But the peace was fragile. The air thrummed with tension, electric and charged, as if the storm was just waiting for a spark to ignite it. The cabin door burst open. Damon and Corin stepped inside, 2 shadows carved from the night itself, both eyes burning with a fierce, possessive hunger that spoke of unyielding desire and claiming. "Lyra," Damon's voice was a growl, low and dangerous. "You belong with me. Always." Corin's smile was that of a fox, cunning, unpredictable. "You're choosing your chains, not your freedom. Don't make a mistake." Ronan shifted, protective and unwavering, but Lyra's gaze drifted away from the confrontation. Her mind swirled with the ghosts of every touch, every whispered promise, every stolen moment from the 3 alphas who had each staked a claim on her soul. Damon's power had been intoxicating, raw, fierce, and full of passion that set fire to her blood. He had awakened something primal in her, a storm she hadn't known she was capable of weathering. But with him came the weight of his dominance, the harsh edge of control that gnawed at her freedom. Corin had been a breath of wild air, a tantalizing promise of freedom wrapped in danger and unpredictable desire. He danced on the edge of chaos, and with him, she felt alive in a way that was reckless but exhilarating. And then there was Ronan, steady, solid, the quiet strength who had bled for her, carried her when she faltered, seen through the power she hid to the woman beneath. He had opened his heart to her in ways the others never dared, offering protection wrapped in the kind of love that didn't bind but liberated. Lyra's pulse quickened. The bonds, those invisible threads pulsing between her and the Alphas, were tangled in her heart. It wasn't just about who desired her most, it was about who saw her true self, who accepted every fractured piece and every flame that burned inside. She pushed herself up, trembling but resolute, eyes blazing with newfound clarity. "I'm not a prize to be claimed," she said, voice strong despite the trembling beneath. "Not a weapon to be wielded. Not a chain to be locked." Her gaze landed on Ronan. "I choose the one who sees me. Not the power. Not the legend. The one who stands with me, even when the world tries to tear us apart." Ronan's eyes widened, vulnerability and hope mixing with a fierce protectiveness that radiated from his every muscle. Slowly, she reached up, fingers trembling as they brushed against his cheek, the warmth there grounding her like nothing else could. Their lips met, soft, desperate, a promise whispered between heartbeats. But then, a flash. A searing, shattering pain exploded through Lyra's chest, like shards of ice tearing through fire. Her breath caught, and she stumbled back, hand clutching at the spot where an ancient, burning mark bloomed beneath her skin. It glowed, a fierce red symbol, alive and pulsing like a heartbeat of its own. Around them, the air crackled with dark energy, the room bending as if reality itself was unraveling. Damon and Corin's eyes darted between Lyra and Ronan, shock mingling with dread. And then it happened. The curse, the one that had haunted her bloodline for centuries, erupted. It tore through the cabin like a wild storm unleashed, ripping at bonds, igniting chaos, and threatening to consume everything. And at the heart of it all was a betrayal no one had seen coming. Lyra's world shattered in a single heartbeat. Chapter 9. The forest was no longer the quiet sanctuary it had been. The moon hung low and swollen, a blazing orb that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. The trees themselves twisted and groaned, gnarled limbs writhing like serpents as shadows deepened into something darker, more primal. The ancient curse, once a whispered legend, had erupted with terrifying force, and the very land around them warped in response. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, cold mist swirling around her as she stood at the heart of the chaos. The air was thick with tension, every leaf, every stone vibrating with the twisted magic unleashed by the blood moon. She could feel it gnawing at the edges of her sanity, the fevered pulse of a power she barely controlled. From the shadows, snarls and guttural growls broke the eerie silence. Former allies, brothers and sisters in the pack, had been consumed by the curse's dark fury, transformed into mindless beasts snarling at anything that moved. Their eyes glowed with an unholy fire, void of reason, driven only by rage and hunger. Lyra's heart pounded fiercely in her chest. Her gaze darted desperately, searching through the chaos for one face, the one she had chosen, the one who held her soul. Then she saw him. Ronan. His form was shaking, muscles twitching beneath the skin as the curse clawed at his mind and body. His eyes, once a calm storm of steady blue, flickered with a wild, desperate light, teetering on the edge of madness. A guttural roar tore from his throat as his hands clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms until the skin broke and blood welled up. The wolf blood inside him was battling the dark magic with everything it had, but the strain was overwhelming. Lyra's breath hitched. She stepped forward, voice trembling but fierce. Ronan. Fight it. You're stronger than this curse. You're stronger than the darkness. But her words were swallowed by the roar of the forest, the twisted chorus of beasts closing in, their snarls like the clash of steel. Her other mates, Damon and Corin, stood nearby, their faces etched with pain and fear. Neither had chosen to step back into the fight, but now the stakes were more than political power or passion. Now, it was survival. The survival of those she loved, and the survival of the pack. Lyra's fingers trembled as she reached into the depths of her wolf blood, calling upon the power she'd struggled to control, the fierce wildness that simmered beneath her skin. Her body hummed with energy, the moonfire coursing like molten silver through her veins. She raised her hands, palms glowing with raw lunar light, and stepped between the beasts and her mate. The wolves snarled, but her power surged like a tidal wave, fierce, unrelenting, and beautiful in its terrifying purity. Leave him. Her voice was a command, a howl of primal authority that echoed through the warped forest. The beasts hesitated, their savage growls faltering as the light cut through the darkness. But the curse was relentless. One of the twisted wolves lunged forward, jaws snapping inches from her arm. Lyra spun, a blur of grace and fury. Claws tore through fur and flesh as she fought with everything she had. Her senses were heightened, every movement sharpened by the wolf inside. The world narrowed to a single point: survival, protection, love. Yet even as she battled, her mind raced with a darker fear. Damon. Corin. Both losing themselves to the curse's pull. The bonds she shared were fraying, the connection strained to breaking. She could feel the desperate tug to save them, to hold them close. But her true mate, the one she had chosen, needed her most. Ronan's struggle grew more violent. He collapsed to his knees, shaking violently, lips pulled back in a snarl that was no longer his own. The wolf blood within him threatened to shatter, to consume what little humanity he had left. Lyra's chest tightened with a pain so deep it was almost unbearable. Her fingers glowed brighter, searing with the raw power of the blood moon as she reached out to him, across the chaos, across the curse's dark grip. "Ronan, come back to me," she whispered, voice trembling with all the love and desperation she could muster. "You're not alone. You are stronger than this." His eyes locked onto hers, fierce, wild, and flickering with recognition. For a moment, a fragile connection shimmered between them, a fragile bridge across the chasm of madness. But then, a sudden, sharp flash of silver caught the moonlight, a blade glinting like ice in the dark. Time slowed. Lyra's heart plummeted. From the shadows, a figure moved with lethal precision, an assassin's grace, cold and merciless. The blade aimed straight for Ronan's heart. Her scream tore free, raw and shattered, as she lunged forward. Chapter 10. The blade caught the moonlight in a terrible gleam, frozen in that suspended moment like a viper poised to strike. Time shattered, shards of sound and motion fracturing the world into chaos. Lyra's body moved before her mind could catch up, a flash of silver fury tearing through the space between death and life. Her hand closed around the wrist gripping the blade, twisting with every ounce of strength she possessed. A roar escaped her throat, not human, not wolf, but something wild and ancient that shook the very earth beneath her feet. The assassin's fingers loosened, the dagger clattering uselessly to the forest floor. Eyes wide with shock and sudden pain, the figure staggered back, mouth opening in a silent scream. But before Lyra could fully process the attacker's identity, a blur of movement intercepted. Ronan, even in the grip of the curse's torment, threw himself forward with the protective ferocity of a true alpha. His arms wrapped around Lyra in a fierce embrace that spoke of devotion and desperation, shielding her from the looming threat. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Lyra's heart thundered wildly, not just with relief, but with a raw, primal connection that deepened as the moon's light bathed them both. The curse's shadow clawed at Ronan's mind, but here, now, his will was bolstered by hers. Her power surged, a radiant blaze that illuminated the night and pushed back the creeping darkness. The other wolves, those twisted by the curse, faltered as the moonlight's purity cut through their rage. One by one, their snarls became whimpers, their eyes clearing as if waking from a nightmare. The forest breathed a long, trembling sigh, the warped trees straightening, the twisted vines relaxing. Peace, fragile and hard-won, settled over the glade. Yet amid the calm, Lyra knew the cost. Corin knelt some yards away, his chest heaving, eyes filled with something like mourning and relief. Damon stood silently, his jaw clenched tight as he averted his gaze. The bonds between them, once tangled in love and power, had been severed by the curse's unforgiving blade. Lyra's gaze lingered on Damon, the unchosen mate, whose fierce love had never wavered despite the impossible odds. Yet the link between them now frayed beyond repair, a thread cut clean by sacrifice and the harsh truths of fate. She swallowed the ache deep within her chest and stepped forward, her voice steady but soft as a whisper on the breeze. Damon, you will always be part of me, but the path we walk now is different. His eyes shone with tears he refused to shed. Then walk it well, Lyra. For all our sakes. Turning away, Damon melted into the shadows of the forest, leaving only the distant echo of his footsteps, and the weight of a bond forever lost. Ronan's hands found hers again, their fingers interlocking as if to anchor both of them against the world's uncertainty. His eyes held hers, steady, sure, filled with something fierce and unbreakable. You're mine, he said, voice rough but certain, and I'll fight to the last breath for what we are. Lyra felt the power of that promise deep in her soul. The pain and loss still lingered, but beneath it bloomed a fierce hope, as wild and unstoppable as the moon itself. As dawn's first light seeped through the trees, the pack gathered around their new alpha Luna, standing tall and radiant beneath the pale glow of morning. Lyra's transformation was complete. The wild huntress had risen, bound by blood and moonlight to a destiny far greater than she'd ever imagined. The ritual of rebirth was quiet but profound. With solemn words and ancient rites, the pack acknowledged her as their leader, their Luna, the bridge between wolf and human, guardian of the fragile balance. Her voice, calm yet fierce, carried through the crisp morning air. We will rebuild, not just our pack, but the harmony between worlds. The old wounds will heal, but we will never forget the sacrifices made. The pack responded with a unified howl that echoed deep into the forest's heart, a promise of unity and strength. And yet, beneath the celebration and new beginnings, a shadow watched. Far beyond the safe circle of light and life, at the forest's edge where twilight lingered longest, a small figure played among the silvered leaves. A child with eyes that shimmered unnaturally, glowing faintly with the same fierce lunar fire that had claimed Lyra. Laughter tinkled through the air, innocent yet haunting, as the child chased shadows in the fading dusk. And just beyond the veil of trees, cloaked in darkness, a figure observed with cold, calculating eyes. A voice, barely more than a whisper, slipped on the night wind, soft and deadly. Soon. Epilogue. 1 year had slipped by like shadows across the moonlit forest, silent, inevitable, marked by the rhythm of seasons turning, of pack and power forging a new harmony from the ashes of what had been. Lyra stood at the edge of the glade, the breeze teasing the dark waves of her hair, eyes lifted to the silver orb that hung low and full in the night sky. The blood moon. A reminder. A warning. Beside her, Ronan's presence was steady, solid and grounding as ever. His hand curled over hers with quiet strength, fingers intertwined like the roots of ancient trees, deep and unyielding. Together, they ruled, not just as Alpha and Luna, but as partners forged in fire and blood, their bond a beacon of hope for the pack that had survived the storm. The pack thrived beneath their leadership. The wounds of the curse had mostly healed, the forest returning to its ancient rhythm, wild and free. New pups played in the sunlight filtering through the trees, their laughter ringing out like music, a promise of a future unshadowed by fear. But even in peace, shadows stirred. That night, as the pack celebrated the blood moon with ritual howls and firelight dancing on faces worn but hopeful, Lyra's thoughts were pulled elsewhere, back to a past she had barely begun to unravel, to a mother whose secrets had slipped like whispers on the wind. Her mother's past, shrouded in mystery, locked away like a forbidden tome, had always felt like a shadow lurking just beyond reach. But now, that shadow had begun to move. A letter had arrived that day, slipped quietly beneath the door of their pack hall, a single parchment, sealed with a sigil that made Lyra's breath catch in her throat. The symbol was one she had seen only once before, burned into the vision of a war she had glimpsed long ago, a war that promised to tear apart everything she loved. Lyra broke the seal, fingers trembling as she unfolded the parchment, the ink dark and sharp like a blade cutting through the calm of the evening. Her eyes scanned the message, every word sending a chill spiraling through her veins. The past you thought buried is awakening. The blood you carry is not just your own. Beware the eastern shadows. The reckoning comes with the next blood moon. She folded the letter slowly, the weight of its warning settling like ice in her chest. Ronan's gaze found hers, his brow furrowed with the kind of concern that spoke of battles yet to come. "Lyra," he said softly, "what does it mean?" She turned to him, eyes blazing with fierce determination and something softer, fear wrapped in love. "It means the fight isn't over," she whispered. "Not by a long shot." Behind them, the pack's howls rose in a chorus that both celebrated their survival and echoed a warning. The blood moon's light shone bright, but the darkness was gathering still. And far to the east, where the winds carried whispers of old magic and forgotten vengeance, a new storm was beginning to stir.